Finally, let's talk about Black Lives Matter. The leaders of Black Lives Matter have been accused of appropriating the donations to buy themselves a $6 million luxury mansion in California. This isn't even the first time that questions have been raised about BLM's finances. I mean, last year there was a big story about Patrisse Cullors, one of the leaders who had managed to acquire a string of luxury properties, each worth, some of them worth in the multiple millions of dollars. Tom, I mean, this kind of story is going to sound very strange to people who have, I don't know, perhaps the mainstream view of Black Lives Matter, who think that this is a grassroots movement dedicated to fighting against police racism and police violence. That's never been the full picture, has it?
It's always been quite complicated for all kinds of different reasons. One of which is because, is Black Lives Matter a slogan or is it an organisation?
Yeah.
If it's an organisation, which organisation? So a lot of the allegations have floated around Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, which Patrisse Cullors was until last year the CEO of and has been heavily criticised for some of her particular decisions. But then there's all these local chapters. There's other organisations. There's other wings. There's other kind of things under that particular umbrella as well of formal organisations. So all of this becomes very, very knotty. And then when you see things like this, so this particular mansion being purchased, the BLM, GNF, people saying that this was about providing a space for activists and for them to create content, also as a kind of safe house. But then again, there's criticism of, was this the right way to spend this money? Why is the organisation being so cagey about how money has been spent? And then you saw this piece in New York Magazine, the Intelligencer section of the website, which has basically got its hands on some of the communications in response to their own inquiries, where they're kind of testing out whether this explanation has got holes in it versus this explanation. So we don't really know what's going on here, but and of course they've strenuously pushed back against any suggestion that this money has been, spent in an improper fashion and all the rest of it. Time will tell. But at the same time, I think it just speaks to the fact that Black Lives Matter is big business.
Yeah.
And it has been ever since it kicked, very quickly after it kicked off in 2014. It's been able to raise a lot of money from a lot of organisations. People have been biting their hands off to give them millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. It closed out 2020 with $60 million left over.
Yeah.
But again, you've seen this criticism, not just from the right-wing press, as BLM founders have liked to present it, but actually even from their own chapters, just saying, where is this money being spent? Where is this actually going? And why isn't there at least some accountability and openness? And it just seems like they can't keep deflecting these questions in the way they have been up until this point.
It seems as if the kind of almost the sheen around Black Lives Matter, the halo around Black Lives Matter might have put off criticism for a very long time. I mean, we are, Black Lives Matter has been around for a lot longer than George Floyd's death. But, we are nearly 2 years on from that. And it's only now that penetrating questions are finally getting through.
Yeah, and the whole thing that most people who've been critical of Black Lives Matter all along, like us, have said that there is a difference between your average person who goes out on the street, wherever it is in America or the UK, with a Black Lives Matter slogan and wants to stand up against injustice or racism, which, there's not much to criticise or talk about there. I mean, it's just a political action taken by an ordinary person. And as Tom says, a kind of the other side of it, which has indulged in and made its main political activity getting other big businesses to either sign up or to, put a black square up or to talk about, use the kind of the slogans and the rhetoric of anti-capitalism, but in this very capitalist way, which was the kind of, there was lots of sort of right-wing panic about Black Lives Matter being anti-capitalist and
Marxist.
And Marx, and it's just, you just scratch the surface a tiny bit and you realise that that's not the case. I mean, this mansion, they don't do themselves any favours. So, they talked about the fact that this particular mansion was going to be a safe house and that it was going to be sort of unknown location or whatever. And then some people pointed out that Patrisse Cullors and two other of the leaders had done a kind of sort of promotional video at the place on the terrace with champagne, which I really don't have a problem with people buying mansions and drinking champagne. I don't think you have to be like wearing a donkey jacket with holes in your tights to kind of be a legitimate left-wing activist. That's just ridiculous. But come on, and the kind of things that are meant to be the kind of creative enterprises that this mansion was meant to house was like ranged from poetry to music to urban agriculture, and like it'll be a very busy mansion, as it sounds like. So there is a dishonesty to a lot of this, and I think the kind of the serious and negative side of it is that if there was ever anything positive about Black Lives Matter, it was that there was at a particular time when something very obviously, problematic for race relations happened in relation to George Floyd's killing and the aftermath of it, and how lots of American police responded to it. There was a genuine sense of something had to be done, and lots of young people, particularly in America, taken to the streets, and that it's been caught up in this kind of very corporate, very safe, very sort of as Tom says, big business friendly and sort of undisruptive format of Black Lives Matter, the corporation, is, I'm sure, will disappoint many people. But if you didn't know that was happening from the start, then you haven't been paying attention to the fact that if Ben and Jerry's are kind of the main promoter of this, then it's not anything particularly radical.
I think that's important. And it reminds you that, in a sense, there was nothing positive about this thing to begin with. I think Black Lives Matter, ultimate sort of, the way I sort of understand it is that this was a hijacking of a understandable kind of concern about the question of police brutality, a positive anti-racist feeling amongst a lot of people, which got hijacked by this identitarian organisation, which, as it turns out, was also potentially questionably run. That's essentially where we've ended up. It's distorted the debate in a really unpleasant fashion. It's mainstreamed what were up to now relatively fringe kind of identitarian ideas around race and identity.
Yeah.
And I think even though, as Ella was saying, for instance, Patrisse Cullors, who was criticised a year ago for buying 4 properties to the cost of over $3 million or something like this. And in and of itself, that's just a sort of lame argument to go after people because they've made some money out of their activism. It's worth pointing out that her argument is that she actually hasn't drawn a wage from the Black Lives Matter Foundation for many years, and up until that point, she got a relatively modest amount. She's made this from all of the activities which swirl around it, her book deals and her production deals and all this kind of other stuff, etc. It's important to point that out. But even taking that as read and not trying to allege any kind of straightforward corruption or anything like that, you do have to ask the question, who benefits from this kind of activism? It's quite clear that these activists have benefited. It's been very useful to their profiles and to their bottom line. It's very clear that big business has benefited from it, who've thrown their arms around this message and this organisation because it's a means through which for them to essentially try and purchase some virtue and feel like they're doing good in the world, in an era where capitalists in particular feel quite uneasy about the position in which they occupy. But it has not benefited one jot ordinary people.
Yeah.
It's further divided. I think it's played a direct role in further dividing America, and also in terms of just essentially in some cases creating excuses for the kind of for the rioting and the violence which ripped through a lot of American cities in 2020 and beyond, and leading to again a kind of pulling back of police and a dreadful situation for a lot of people in very troubled Black communities. So whilst without wanting to get into the kind of weeds of what it has done, where has the money gone, who spent what, etc., on the broader scope, I think this just reminds us that the legacy of this organisation has been a dreadful one, and that under the banner of radicalism and anti-racism, it's basically only really benefited people at the top, and if anything, done a complete disservice to people of all skin colours at the bottom.